joining us for the second time. He joined us once early last year as well. So
did.
if you're one of the few that's been with us since the beginning, you'll recognize him. But we have new content tonight to go over. So whether you're just joining us or have been with us for a while, you're going to find great value here tonight.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us again.
No, I'm happy.
I'm going to quickly introduce him. He owns Fitness with Benny's with his wife, Nikki. They do ministry through fitness, which is Christ-centered, right?
Yep,
Correct?
Christ-centered.
We're looking at becoming more like Christ through improving our bodies, right? Which I, as a religious person, appreciate and love that. He is a nutritionist and personal trainer, and he has a great story to share with us tonight. So, Benny, I know you shared with us last year, but if you could just start at the beginning, tell our audience here what you've been through, what kind of changes you went through, and what led you to this ministry through fitness kind of lifestyle.
Oh, we'd need probably a 3 or 4 part series to really like dive into this whole thing. So I'm going to kind of go through this. So, Otto will appreciate this joke. And this is kind of how I say this, but I have a joke about my past. And I say I have more degrees than the doctor next to me. I have a couple first degrees, second degrees, third degrees, because I learned completely wrong. And in that process, God forgave me. And then the state of Washington also forgave me. And that was about 12 years later. So
wow,
since I last got on here, I completely vacated my record. So I am no longer, I'm just a normal
awesome.
Law-abiding citizen at this point.
Congratulations, that's great.
And I get to choose who I tell my story to. So I really enjoy this. So if you see me look in 3 different ways on here, we have like quite a few cameras in front of us. So I apologize for that as well. But long story short, I ended up in 2007. I was diagnosed with severe psoriatic arthritis. And with that came a huge onslaught of medications.
How old were you?
18. I got diagnosed about 10 days after I was 18.
With psoriatic arthritis?
Yes.
Wow.
And
okay.
So after my beginning of my senior year, I ended up getting a whole bunch of just patches and rashes, and it got really bad really quick, like within a month. So after that got going, I went to a family med doc, and then I was waiting to see a dermatologist and some other things. And then by the end of it, I could not get into the rheumatologist that quick because I had a dermatology appointment and he knew what I had. He just couldn't legally diagnose the arthritis, right? So I had a family med doc prescribing me Oxycontin and the boom of the Oxycontin pandemic. So they were just handing me meds.
Yeah.
And it was just, long story short, I was off and running to the races for about another 3 years, graduated into an illegal pharmaceutical rep, which I kind of would call like, Purdue Pharma rep for the other side.
Sure.
And it was expected is the word I would call that, because I knew for a fact, like, looking back at it now, it's everything that you could expect it to happen if you just handed it to a kid and just went to the races.
In pain, sure.
Yeah, I was an honor student. I'm very smart. I'm very gifted when it comes to intelligence and a lot of the things, but I don't have very much good common sense. So when I had to put that down. So by 2011, I got caught up in some pretty deep stuff. When I got caught, I was very close to a federal sentence, and by God's grace, like he allowed me not to see 26 years behind bars, but instead I had ended up in the state versus a federal penitentiary. That was the difference. So I didn't realize how much of a blessing it was until even sitting here today looking back at it. So 2013, I got out, I started on probation, I started doing some other things. And then by 2015, so I was still in and out of treatment after I got out. Like nothing had changed. Like, mentally, like, I was free. I thought I was better than still. I had this superiority complex. I had a lot to change. Like, so when we get into this a little bit deeper, we'll talk a little bit more about the behaviors in the past too. So 2015, I had ran into somebody that I was in high school with. And he had told me that, maybe you should write some goals out. I looked up to him, he had a nice car, all these like material things that I thought I needed. So like it was at that time, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll listen to you. It was at that time I'll listen. I wrote out a year's worth of goals and I actually reverse engineered them. So when I got going with it, all I knew was I wanted abs. I was smoking cigarettes at the time and I had nothing really good going for me. So I was working hospitality. I wasn't doing much with my life. There was nothing good. So I went to the gym and I gave myself 90 days. 2015 happened. I started on February 1st. I wrote my goals at a Red Robin on January 31st. I can tell you the meal that I was eating when I wrote my goals, because that was the day that was really important to me. And then February 1st, it was off to the races. So by the time I got into 90 days, I had lost 52 pounds. So
this was, you set the goal 90 days later, 52 pounds down.
yeah, in my original goals, I only thought I had 20 pounds to lose, right? Like, so in my head, I was like, I wrote down 20. I didn't weigh myself. Like, I just knew I had to cut out a few things. Like, I can tell you the no's that I didn't do. So I quit eating fast food. I quit going to the coffee shop, and I cut all my caloric beverages. Like, so no Pepsi, no soda. And I was drinking a ton of soda, like a gallon of soda a day. Fast food, pizza. I started cooking meals, and just really simple meals, just very low carb meals, veggies, ground turkey I survived on, and just very basic. And it would just strip my whole being, because I didn't know. I had no idea what to eat nutritionally.
Sure.
I asked a bodybuilder what to eat at the gym when I went there every day, and I just had no clue. I honestly had no education, no knowledge in food, and I grew up with a single mother as well. So I was fed a lot of the donuts and Slurpees, and there was just, my mom did the best she could, but she just didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have
And
a
she
dad.
had a lot on her plate, and yeah.
I get it. And I was an only child too. So there was no real accountability in my life ever. And that was all the way up till I was like 30. Like, I had nobody around me actually wanting to like lift me.
Sure.
So I learned all the wrong things too. So by the time that came out, fast forward, I got a job as a coach with zero experience. No certs, no nothing.
And this is after you've lost, like after
weight.
you've lost the 52
This is about
pounds?
probably a year after. I was still going to the gym, and I had quit smoking finally. And that was in itself. There was a lot of stuff. Like, I wrote down everything. Like, okay, if I need abs, I'm probably going to have to be at the gym 5 days a week, probably on some sort of supplement regimen, probably eating pretty well. I'm not going to be going out at night. I'm not, like, you actually have to write these things down. You make the vision clear, and it actually helps you stay on track going forward. So fast forward 2016, I got a job at Physique, which was a group fitness. Like, you know, like, this was like, we'll talk about that a whole nother day, but there was not really a standard in the fitness either. So it got me going on like 60-person classes.
Yeah.
And I realized, I'm like, oh, there was a lot of injury going on. So and that's how I kind of transitioned my way by 17 into personal training, because I didn't like what I saw in large group fitness.
Interesting.
And so by 2017, started fitness with Benny's, and it was a hobby. I had no idea what I was getting into. I sucked at finances. I sucked at business. I sucked at a lot of things. I was a slow learner on that part. I got my nutrition certification first, because in my head, I thought everybody wanted nutrition. Everybody was going to, you know, call me up, and like, you got this huge like client base. I'm like, yeah, they're going to want nutrition. And I heard crickets, and I there was nothing. So, and then about the end of 2017, I got my personal training certification, because I'm like, well, if nobody wants food, then I'm just going to start training. And so that kind of brought on the movement stuff. And that's what I really focused on, because I saw so many things in the fitness realm where, how do I say this? There wasn't too much education around the movement. I had met some PTs, I had met some decent massage therapists, but nobody combined the movement side of the training, because they didn't understand the anatomy enough.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of learning with it. So, and that's where I kind of got into a lot of the foam rolling, the self, like, you can fix it yourself. You just have to be taught how.
Sure. And that's really your focus of your business now, right? The movement and the pain relief from the correct movements, right?
Yes. You know, and we just had, you know, we were just over there like a week ago. I wish you were there for it too.
Yeah,
and, you know, even Otto learned a lot too, but we did a movement clinic, and it's interactive. So what I have people do is I have 3 people sitting in front of 3 other people.
Yeah.
And I have them doing the actual, like, tell me the imbalances that you visually see, and I will help them write it.
Yeah.
Because they can see, like, oh, I see that ankle. I see that hip that's super tight. I see one actually moves farther than the other. And that's how simple imbalance is. Like, it's not complicated. when Otto blew up his shoulder too, I had like worked on him almost immediately.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's this, you know, it's like, there's only two things it can be.
Yeah.
Like, so we went on it and started going with it.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
10 years later, still love fitness, and I'm just here to help.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so before we dive into the personal history part that we've kind of been focusing on in our webinars this month, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that. Tell us just a little bit, let's go back to this transformation that you went through.
Yep.
How was your life different? I mean, obviously you made a lot of big changes and you were able to sustain them, but how was your life different after you lost that weight and changed your lifestyle, the way you ate, the way you moved, the way you quit smoking, all of that? What changed?
Oh man, I think it starts with the mindset. Honestly, there's 3 questions I always ask, and in those 3 questions, you might not have one of them. Okay. So these are really important questions to ask anybody. You ask on a 1 to 10, how willing are you to do this task, X task, or whatever it is, right?
Change. Yeah.
How willing are you? And like, if somebody's not a 9 or a 10, they're not going to make those changes because they're not willing.
Yeah.
Number 2, are you ready on a 1 to 10? How ready are you? Well, I'm like a 7. What if I got rid of the number 7 and you had to pick a 6 or an 8? What would it be? And so that kind of gets them to make a decision, because that's a whole nother thing too, because sometimes with people, it's not the fact that they're afraid to start. It's just the fact that they can't make a decision.
Right.
So, and then the third one, this is the big one, okay? Because you might be willing and ready, but the question is, are you able to? This is where timing kind of plays just a little bit of a role. I wouldn't say it's very big, but once in a while you get people who aren't able to do it.
Sure.
But you can miss one of those.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so what would you say to people, and I know I fall into this category a lot, right? What would you say if somebody really wants to be willing and ready, but if they're being really honest with themselves, they might be more like a 6 than a 9. And they just feel discouraged, right? Because they think, well, I really want to make this change, but if I'm really being honest, I'm probably not as willing or ready as I think I am. How do you get to a 9 if you're not there?
That's the question I always ask too. Like, if we're at a 6, like, what needs to happen in order to get you to a 9? Do you need to gain another 20 pounds? Do you and that's the hard part. Do you think
the desperation, what has to happen where you hit rock bottom kind of thing?
Oh my gosh, man. Yeah. Like, nobody comes into weight loss or fitness happy.
Right.
You don't start this journey and like, you don't see Otto. You don't come into this out of pain. There's always some level of pain. It could be mental, it could be trauma, it could just be being overweight, how they look in the mirror. There's 100 different things that it could be. Chronic illness, it could be diabetes, it could be an onslaught of all these things.
Right.
And it really, each pain point's different for each person.
Yeah.
Like, I came from a really low spot. Like, you couldn't get much lower than I started. Like, and if you could, like, I remember how bad it was.
Sure.
Right? So depending on how bad your starting point is, kind of dictates your end point.
Sure.
In my opinion, because you can either stay in a really bad spot and not do anything, your status quo just stays the same, or at that 6-month mark, 6 months seems to be the magic mark if somebody's going to actually make a lasting change or not.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. So if we can motivate people to make it to 6 months, a lot of times that's a good sign that they can. Then they keep going. I like that. So really, we can look at it as, I may not feel ready today, but I don't necessarily want to get to the point where it gets worse, where I am ready. Maybe that can be kind of a motivating factor. Is that what you're saying? Is kind of look ahead?
Yeah.
That's a good point. I like that. Okay, so let's dive for a second into this idea of personal history. So last week, anybody that joined us last week on our webinar, we really dove into looking at past patterns. So kind of you were mentioning this similar thing with looking at what the patterns were growing up and disassociating any need to guilt or shame or blame, right? You're saying your mom did the best she could with what she had. And I think there's power in accepting that this is what it was. There's no shame or guilt associated with that. But then how do you take your past and then use that to shape how you want your future to be different?
Yeah. Honestly, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
I have this visual that I want you guys to think about, okay? When you're driving down the street the next time, I want you to ask yourself, why is the windshield bigger than the rear view?
I like that.
and it's like, it doesn't matter where you're at in life. You can use it for fitness, career, family, marriage. It doesn't matter, right? Because honestly, in any relationship, business, and especially in fitness, even in my own marriage, if I continue to look back on any of the things that didn't work for me in my past, like, mistakes just let me know I'm trying,
Right.
right? It's a very valid point for most people. Like, most people have probably coming here have tried 1 to 4 different things, I would assume, right? They have tried different things and without,
Success.
yes,
Yeah.
no success, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the same goal when it comes to me. I just, I have a different market. So if somebody finds me, or I'm reaching out to people that their story, I love people that actually have a really bad past.
Sure.
Because I just relate better to them, right?
Sure.
It's like,
Yeah.
wow, I get it. And,
Yeah.
I ended up with a lot of people that just have, whether they're cancer survivors, they went to chronic illness, they had diabetes, a lot of these things that were like life changing for most people. And so as they got into it a little bit deeper, oh man, how would I say this about the past? There's a saying in AA, you can't shut the door on your past, but you can't really let go of it, right? Because it's always there. So as I would say, when you guys start moving forward a little bit more as well, I really truly believe that's your fuel. It can either keep you stuck
Sure.
forever. Like, you won't make a single change if you keep living in 1.0 version of yourself, right?
Yeah.
You come to Otto hoping you're going to have a 2.0, right?
Sure.
If we focus on 1.0, are we going to stick in fear, shame, and guilt? Or what would 2.0 version end up being?
Yeah.
So that's one of my biggest questions when I actually have, an enrollment call with somebody. So when they come into me, I ask them, I'm like, well, okay, Emily, what's 2.0 version look like? Right?
Yeah.
We're 1.0 right now. Well, be super specific. How big are they? What do you have abs?
Yeah.
Did you buy a bathing suit? What beach are you sitting on?
Right.
Where are the kids?
Right.
Like, all those questions matter, right? And I just think that from that point of view, we have to think about what the 2.0 version of us in the future through the windshield is going to look like, instead of reaching in our back pocket, being stuck.
Yeah. I love that. Do you feel like there is value in recognizing the past, though? I mean, you don't want to get stuck there, but how do you kind of recognize and take, I guess, power and inertia from the experiences that have shaped your past?
There's been 2 things. I like, one thing that really reminds me when I'm doing a lot of I like long endurance races. I'll give you a little context for this, right? So today I really like going as far as I can, as long as I can, because it's the only place that I can actually truly battle my own mind in a state of defeat.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I scream, I cry at 20 some miles, and my emotions are there. But what I found in those moments, if I let those thoughts get me, because I remember the darkest places. Like, I remember sitting in a jail cell with a door, like a piece of paper going through my door in county jail that said, we're just waiting for the feds to pick up your case. And I was 21. I thought my life was over. And I have some really dark spots in my past that I hang on to, because honestly, it's like almost like I'm running away from them. I still remember them clear as day. Like, I pray nobody has to go through what I did to get to a point where I'm at to help others.
Yeah.
Like, it's honestly a simple, like, I went through so much pain, self-induced agony, kept doing it over and over. And that was the insanity of the past, right?
Sure.
The definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. There's a lot of...
We all do that to an extent, don't we?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And doing something new isn't hard. It's just new.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So anybody listening, something new isn't supposed to be done easily, right? You've probably never done something like this. I've never had to hop on an app. I've never had to actually do the accountability. So anything that's new, it doesn't matter. Even if you read a new book or you're trying to start reading, like, that takes some time from something else.
Right.
So if we're stuck, like, habit stacking, right? If I look at my past, I never prepped food. I never cooked. I ate out. Like, there was a lot of habits that I did in my past that I can compare and contrast, even from like a 3rd grade standard. Like, I have a little task you can do on half of your paper. Write down something you did 5 years ago, and then on the other half of it, on the other right side, write down things you do today. That's a good way to kind of tell like if you're actually growing, and if you're doing the same habits, then nothing's changed.
Sure.
So you kind of have to use that. I don't have guilt and shame for my past because it's the only way I know, like it's the only way I could have gotten away from it.
Yeah.
My life would have turned out so much differently had I had not gone through what I did.
Yeah.
So
you can use it as motivation almost. I don't want to be back there, but also I recognize the part it played to get me to where it was today, to
100%.
motivate me to turn that around.
I had to.
Let's go back for just a minute. I noticed we had a few comments. We have a few people saying things like they start their day at a 9 and they end their day at a 3. I can so relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do to keep the momentum up, not just throughout the day, but did you ever have a point when you first made these big changes? And I know you were very motivated from feeling like you're at rock bottom, but what did you do during those times where you felt less motivated to kind of push through that?
Gratitude journals, quite a bit.
Okay.
Every day. Like, here's the thing about gratitude journals. You know, they'll talk about gratitude like it needs to be like done.
Yeah.
Right? Gratitude's an actual like state. Like, honestly, like you can't be angry and grateful at the same time. And so I got a notebook. I started journaling everything. So this is something that's never talked about in fitness. Nobody talks about journaling, mental health, stress management, or sleep. Those are the top things that will actually...
Except us, we do.
And that's one thing though, you know, so with the journaling side of things, I started taking pen to paper. I wouldn't type at the beginning. So I had a little tiny notebook, just a small little notebook, started writing it out. 5 things I was grateful for. What's one thing I accomplished today? One. It didn't matter. If I made it through the day and I just did like a 10-minute workout, that was an accomplishment for me.
Yeah, sure.
If I cooked my meal when I got home, like Megan, those days, right? I would ask you, if you even put this in the chat too, I would ask you what happens throughout the day that makes you think that it ends at a 3? Like, what's your perception of it? So if you can put that down, because I'm curious, like if you wake up in a great mood, I would honestly take all that, like what you got in here. And because the greatest thing about women is they journal way better than men, right? Like men are logical reasoning, but women actually take the emotions that they feel and they can transfer it really well. Men suck at validating it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of have to like, I want to fix all these things instead of just like, oh, maybe I just need to sit and say, you know what? Good for you.
Yeah,
That's
for
a
sure.
good.
Well,
So-
I don't know what Megan would say, but for me, I know, you know, I 100% this way. I start the day, I'm fresh, I'm motivated, I feel good, I've been rested, sleep, there you go. And by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I've probably been too busy to eat well, so now I'm starving. You know what I mean? And so a lot of it is just the fatigue, which is why sleep is such a powerful reset. But what do we do during that? I was just actually saying on the webinar last week that 5 to 8 p.m., that's my danger zone, right? Because that's where I'm tired and life
100%.
is crazy. So what do you do to kind of counteract some of that?
I will, I'll tell you, nothing like your last 10 minutes of the day are useless. So like kind of keep that in your pocket. Like, don't be mad that you didn't get something done in your last 10 minutes. Like,
Or last 3 hours?
most people have families, and the hard part about like integrating any sort of fitness, like thank God for me, like my wife and I work together and we do our fitness and we have our coaching business together. So I have this blessing of like having my wife next to me. We get to work with all of our people, you know, we get to cook together. Like nobody else has that.
Yeah.
Right. So in and itself is just a blessing right there. But when it comes to other people, if I had a 9 to 5 to go to, or if I actually had to travel anywhere, I would actually have to plan.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything. So I don't know if you guys use Google Calendar much, but my calendar's like full to 80%. I have very little wiggle room for it because if you pack it too full, just like you would your normal schedule, what happens? You start cracking at the seams and then you feel like a failure anyway.
Sure.
So
I'm guilty of that.
Big thing that we did too not too long ago was a course on proper planning and time management, because anytime, like I said before, anytime you start something, anything you start new, it is pulling away from something else in your life.
Yeah.
So if you're not willing to do that trade-off, right, you're not going to make progress anyway.
And that's that willing, ready, able thing.
And so, you know, and when we get down to it a little bit more, I know you and I were going to talk about, you know, the difference between having realistic goals and attainability.
Yeah.
You know, and that's another thing that we'll talk, like,
Yeah.
That's a big piece.
That's a tough one. And Megan says exactly what I can relate to too, that it's just, she's a doctor working with patients.
Oh gosh. Okay.
She's coming home, taking
Okay.
care of her family. And it's hard to put yourself first, right? At the end of the day, when you've got a lot of other needs that you're caring for, you're a caregiver and you're caring for other people. So how do you put your needs first?
I got such a lesson for you guys. Okay.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I had a doctor about 9 years ago ask me one question that just put my whole entire life and business in a perspective. Okay. And I hope this hits you home because you probably asked yourself this. I had this doctor ask me, Benny, who is the number one most important person in your business? And I'm like, well, probably my clients, doc.
Yeah.
And he goes, no,
It's
you are. He goes, because if you lose your ability, you're no good to anyone.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it was like a light bulb came on. And I realized at that moment, I'm like, oh, you're telling me if I spend a little more time, money, and a little bit like into myself, that like I will actually have better results.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so by 35, I'm young. I'm still a pup when I say this. So I ended up prioritizing my sleep. I prioritize my self-care and supplements, and I eat really good food. Those are like 3 non-negotiables in my life today. Like sleep being the top. I even argue with my wife over it. I'm like, dude, I'm going to bed. Like, oh, you're always. I'm like, look, if you want to stay up and be young still, cool. I can't do it anymore. Because honestly, on average, and I'll talk about this with the sleep thing, okay? So if you get 7 hours of sleep a night, you are losing a full night of sleep over the course of those 7 days. So, you're supposed to get 56 hours a week. So we were at 49. So we're on a 1-day sleep deficit. If you're getting 6 hours of sleep, which is on average what most people get, you're getting enough sleep for 5 days, right? So you have a 2-day sleep deficit. And if you're getting 5.5, you're getting roughly 60% of your whole week.
Yeah.
Do you expect to function at 100% when you're only sleeping at 60 something?
Yeah.
So I actually, before I start getting people going with nutrition and start making these really big changes, right? I'm like, let's work on your bedtime routine. Let's see if you can even set your phone down an hour before bed and read a book. Like, has nothing to do with fitness, but it'll change your whole life waking up in the morning because it changes your perspective when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer on nighttime routines, and this is all over the course of like my whole life and changing what I had to for me.
Yeah.
So
that's great. And I'm excited. We have an entire webinar on sleep at the end of next month. And we learn in that not only how to change your sleep routine, but all of the ways that lack of sleep affects every system of your body and your weight loss.
Yes, it does.
And actually an entire different series over the summer, we're going to talk about how many calories you burn while you sleep, if you sleep enough. So that is really quite fascinating. Let me switch gears a little bit here. Next week, we're just going to give a quick preview to next week. We talk a lot about body image and societal expectations versus what healthy looks like. We don't need to dive fully into that, but I think one of the most important lessons for next week is how do we accept and love ourselves first so that we have the positive energy to be able to make those changes effectively. Because I think unless you can offer yourself self-love and self-care, then you don't have the momentum and the discipline and all of the things you need to be able to make those changes. Don't you think?
Yep.
So what was your experience with that, and what do you teach your clients?
Self-love and self-care is like 2 separate things, right? There's a verse that I really like that says, love others as you would love yourself. So I don't think self-love's hard, right? Because honestly, we have a problem loving others more than we love ourselves, right? Because we are born to be selfish, right? It's not hard to be selfish and actually treat yourself before somebody else because it's kind of like the survival tactic, right? Now, self-care is taught a little bit backwards in society, right?
Yeah.
Where the aesthetics value is actually probably pressed on people more, instant gratification.
Sure.
So when it comes to the self-care side, if you got a big group of people who is telling you, oh, a cookie's okay, and the social support's a big thing around self-care that gets just collapsed on itself. And I think with that, you got to really actually budget it in, because self-care is expensive. Like if I explained how much, I would say between my fitness, my supplements and just like anything that has to do with like extra nutrition costs, protein, those things, I spend about 600 to 700 a month.
Wow.
On my self-care, right?
Okay.
And then I've had to try simple things and not, but honestly, I take a priority in that. I would rather take it away from other areas of my life
Sure.
because I know it's going to come back tenfold.
Sure.
Like 100%, right? Like the
benefits.
coaching's better, the clientele's better. I mean, I can end up educating myself to
Sure.
like make it back somewhere, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of how my mindset works. So, I mean, I took my notes on this and I said, you know, on the beauty thing, I wrote down, don't get me started, because aesthetics in Liberty Lake, Spokane, I think aesthetics in 2025 has been, that thing's even more expensive than the self-care budget that I taught you too. And I am not against it by any means, but I think somebody needs to come into your life and ask you questions about what's truly important, right? Is your self-care actually important? You know what the hard part is? You know, and I was talking to Otto about this, and I hope he doesn't get mad that I brought this up. But last week I asked him, I'm like, you know who your main competition is, Otto? And he goes, no. I'm like, a plastic surgeon, right?
Yeah.
Because when you put the cost up to itself, right?
Sure.
Like somebody might just go and pay $25K for a liposuction. Cool.
Yeah, we don't charge that though.
I'm just saying, but
Yeah.
you got results in 2 weeks, but the perceived effort for it,
Right.
somebody is willing to pay 4 to 6 times
Right.
as much for an instant result without any work. And that's what I'm saying. So even if I charge a little measly $1,000 for my training, I ask them, I'm like, are you willing to pay 20 for liposuction?
Sure.
And they're like, oh, I might actually, you know, and it's like in their head, there's like, they know they're going to get the outcome they want.
Right.
There is zero work to get it.
Sure.
I just have to pay the money. I have the money.
Yeah.
Most people do. It's just they don't want to spend it on something if they don't value it.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's kind of the hard part about like learning this whole process in fitness over 10 years, because I'm battling with plastic surgeons. I'm battling with somebody who's, you know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against GLP-1s, but I'm battling against somebody who would rather pay $500 for a shot to lose that weight.
Sure.
Right. And I have to be able to say, hey, like, let's see if we can actually do something. Do you think you could do ABC?
Yeah.
You know, can you just talk to me every day? Just like maybe take pictures of your food and, you know, go walk every day.
Sure.
And those are the questions, right? Because that's the true battle. But like I said, like, I think some people truly need that, right? Like every person who has found ShillMed, like Otto and I have great talks, and it's one of these things where the clientele needs to see some results. That's where motivation comes from.
Right.
If you're not losing, you're not going to keep going, and you're out the door anyway.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. Like even those first couple pounds, I mean, if you can get 10 pounds off, that might be like, oh my gosh, I've never done this in my life.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they might be willing to spend a little bit more on themselves.
Sure.
Because you being here, you're not paying for this. This is a solution.
Right.
Right? Like time is valuable. And the only thing, you can either buy it back later on when you're wealthy and you're not healthy. But if you don't have the health, you will absolutely have no time in the future.
So prioritizing self-care to invest in your future,
Yes.
essentially. And, you know, I just want to go back to what you said for just a second about selfishness.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important differentiation. We're going to talk about this a lot next week. The difference between self-care and selfishness, they're actually opposite,
They are.
right? And then the other thing about self-love versus selfishness is also different. I think the difference being a lot of times when we turn inward and we're acting selfishly, we're actually self-loathing, not self-loving. And the more we self-love, the more we actually turn outwards. And so I think learning to accept ourselves where we're at then actually can motivate us to kind of propel that change. Because we let go of a lot of the angst that surrounds the selfishness and insecurities.
Yeah, absolutely
So
right.
thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up tonight, I want to take just a minute and have you tell us about your new online business. I know you're moving across the state, but you're opening an online branch. And for any of our patients watching tonight who may be interested in your services, go ahead and tell us what that'll look like.
Man, so I've been doing full-time in-person personal training for the past 8 years now. So I never looked at online fitness as anything that I truly wanted to do until I stepped into it and I saw the results quickly. Like honestly, people need to come to a coach for results. They need to come to you guys for results.
Sure.
They're not coming in to like just not have like you're expecting to see changes. and the online side of things of what we do. So we transitioned our whole business. So we're moving down to Ridgefield, Washington at the end of next month.
Yeah.
Like it's soon. Like, and I grew up out here my whole life. So this is a big change for me. So we work with Christian business owners and a lot of people to get fit for their families so they can actually live freely in Christ. That is my main pitch line for everybody. And as we do this too, the one thing I'm going to keep in person and is the movement clinics that we have.
Yes.
So, and that's kind of a partner. So I will be up here in Liberty Lake and Spokane about every 6 to 8 weeks. And I might be sooner or later too, but I'm going to come into the space at ShillMed and I'll be there too. And Otto's really good about putting that up there too.
Yeah.
So if you guys want more information on that, just watch your emails because we'll have dates set up and within business hours too. And the last one went about 2 hours and it ended up being really good. Like I loved it. The last one was really fantastic.
Walk us through just for a second what you did in that clinic. What did you offer the patients in that clinic?
So an interactive movement clinic essentially shows you that all your imbalances and weakness in your body causes your pain, and then the pain causes the diagnosis.
Right.
A pain's a check engine light in your body saying something's wrong. We can all agree on that, right?
Yeah.
The diagnosis is the symptom of the actual cause,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you're high pressure, like when something in your motor goes out, or if you need spark plugs, like your check engine light will come on and tell you there's a code for your actual spark plugs.
Sure.
So when we have weakness on one side and we're very strong on the other, we'll actually have problems in the stronger side, usually because the weak side's not doing its job. So it actually it rears its head on the opposite of what you think it is.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the weakness is literally the root cause of all the imbalance and all the pain and all the diagnosis that you face. I'll tell you another story another day. But as we went in, like I said, I had 3 people on one side, 3 people on the other. We would go through, I would educate them. I have a 4-step system that is like very, very simple to use. And as you go into that, we just touch over like what each one is. And then at the very end of it, I'll create a custom program for each person so they can actually know exactly what they need to do. And what we found on this last one was that 4 out of the 5 people had ankle dysfunction. And I'm talking like, your calf, when you get really tight calves, like we had 2-inch differences on calf mobility, which is substantial. That'll cause a hip replacement.
Sure.
So if you get imbalances like that, your other leg's going to compensate for it, which is not supposed to happen. And so there was like a lady in there who had a hip replacement. I got a guy with a shoulder that I wasn't working on, but there was some pretty major like stuff. Like I had 4 weeks, just had a surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid to work with that because I've worked with so many people like this. So by the end of it, we visually will have these people looking at each other, looking at the imbalances of the other people. And they're like, Ben, like they literally do the work for me. Like, honestly, I'll have them check boxes. I'm like, oh, this is tight. That's definitely weak.
And
like
then
I'll have them
use strength training to kind of correct those imbalances.
And then I'll have them do a couple other things before that because you can't just go straight into strengthening. And it's a fantastic, fantastic way to go.
And what kinds of results are you seeing with your clients that you're working with long-term, and about how long does it take them to see those changes, those results in their decrease in pain?
Oh yeah. Like pain goes away within 6 to 8 weeks. It's very easy. Like I can put, depending on somebody's pain tolerance, this is kind of the one thing that's kind of the I would say the wild card, right?
Sure.
Because if somebody has a very low pain tolerance, we're not going to be able to get too deep into them. So it might take a little bit longer, right? So you're going to have pain, whether it's from moving wrong, training, CrossFit. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you do. If you're a runner, you're going to have pain, but you're trying to keep up with the balances and the imbalances quite a bit. So with that, you got to kind of know what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like if one calf is tight and the other is not, you're not stretching both calves. You're only stretching the one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the hard part, right? So you have to know what you're doing, because if you overstretch an already weak muscle, you're going to make it worse.
Sure.
And that's why you don't stretch those. So with the online side of this too, that is the only in-person thing I will offer as a group. Then online, we're doing fully, like I cover all bases of what comes to fitness, customized fitness programs, customized nutrition, We do customized accountability. We have a full online group. We definitely have more support than that as well with us. And then my wife's on there as well. So you kind of have two coaches, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
It's still super new for us, but we've transitioned probably 80% of our clientele on there. And they already are like, I haven't seen the compliance side until they went online. And honestly, I was like, why haven't I done this?
Why haven't we been doing it already?
Because that's the hardest thing in compliance. Is like, are you doing what you need to do? Yes or no?
For sure. So to sign up for your services, you just go to your website?
Oh my goodness. Just message me on Instagram, right? At Fitness with Benny's, and just throw us in there. And you can go follow us too. Like I become like kind of a geek on the video creation side. I'm trying to slowly get better at it because everything's online now. And I just absolutely enjoy it. And
I forgot we have a picture of you here to
there's
share.
A couple. I have a few professional photos.
Let's see. This is Benny and his wife Nikki, and here is one of your pain clinics, right?
Yep.
So Dr. Shill's gonna. He already did it. He's so ahead of me. Your Instagram there linked in the comments if anyone is interested in increasing their accountability and coming up with customized plans. Please check him out on Instagram. That's a great way to kind of add to what we're doing with you already at ShillMed. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
I always enjoy these, you know, and because all the people on here, and you got straight professional fields of like medicine in here, like all these things. And you got to realize you are no good to anybody. Like if people are coming to you, this is why I respected Otto. And I'll say this one more time. Okay. I didn't know what Otto did when he walked into the gym and trained with me.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this. Okay.
Yeah.
I just told him, keep showing up, man. You look like you work hard. Like just keep showing up.
Yeah.
And every day I walked up to this guy, like, and all of a sudden he just told me one day, he's like, oh yeah, I'm an internal med doc. I go, what? And I'm like, since when? I had no idea.
Since
right?
Yesterday.
And but the thing that gained my respect for him is that he went through and used his own products.
Yeah.
Lost a ton of weight and kept it off.
Yeah, he has. He's done great.
I don't know what other doctor in this field of medicine has actually done that before. And that's why I still would give him my time before like another one, because I absolutely love that, you guys are actually following what you teach and preach. And that's a more important part for me.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
And I will end on this, that Benny and Dr. Schill met at the gym, as he mentioned, and Benny from day one was a cheerleader and a motivator to him. So if you're looking for additional, other than us, to be your cheerleader and motivator to help you come up with customized fitness plans, Benny's enthusiasm and encouragement and positive cheerleading skills will get you there. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Thank you for being on. We hope that you'll join us next week. It's going to be a great topic, all about understanding how to care for yourself, how to have realistic ideas of what body image should look like, self-love, all of the things that are really essential to your weight loss journey. So thank you for being with us tonight. Remember, the future is bright. We'll see you again next time. Good night. Awesome. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for joining. Good night. Thanks for joining.